GitLab Team Retrospective. My name is Darva Satcher, and I am your host for today's meeting. We have a retrospective that is both synchronous and asynchronous. So if you are following us asynchronously, we have a retrospective summary video, we have a slide deck, and today's meeting will also be async if you're going to review the video later, and if you're joining us right now, it will be synchronous. Today, we will be discussing our previous retrospective improvements for around 5 minutes, the discussion topics, 2 topics at 7 minutes each, improvements to track for next release for 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, so I will get started. We will get started with the previous retrospective improvement task. CZ, are you on the call?
Yes, I can talk first. Last time we said we wanted to keep working on some performance improvements. And in the last release, we did 2 things. First, based on our research, we increased the number of our Elasticsearch cluster shards, I think which result in a good performance improvements. And the second thing is like we are splitting our Elasticsearch index into multiple ones based on the data type. We hope it will buy us the performance improvements as well. Yeah. Thank you, Ava.
Thank you, CZ. Lindsay, are you on the call? All right, I will verbalize for Lindsay. The praise section was not added to the retrospective summary. It was only added to the issue template. This was completed for this 13.6 retro, and a praise section can now be found below. Ricky, are you available?
Yeah, sure thing. We were just having a little bit of issues with forgetting documentation up into the merge request going into review. So we kind of just resolved to reinforce the current process and ensure that the documentation section of issues is well filled out, and engineers are taking a look at that prior to moving the issue into the workflow in review status column. So we're getting better at our remembering documentation.
All right, thank you. And I just added 2 items on the list. I experimented with the polypoll feature to gather votes for the discussion topics that we're going to have later on. I'll be interested to see how people like that addition, and you all can mention that in the retrospective on the retrospective. The next item is I created a playlist. I was going through looking at previous retrospectives and they weren't in a playlist. So I just created a playlist. So maybe moving forward, as we create retrospective videos, we can store them in that playlist. All right, we can move on to our discussion topics. So as I mentioned earlier, I used polypoll, and according to polypoll, we did not have a tie, but by the time I got to this document, we did. So I went with the first, which was div values that had the highest votes. So I will be talking about community contributions. So there will be a quarterly hackathon for GitLab community team members to come together to work on merge requests and to participate in tutorial sessions and support each other on the GitLab contributors channel. And there is one coming up very soon, so I thought this was a very timely discussion. Would anyone like to share their best practices for creating issues that appeal to community contributors? All right, well, I will kick off the discussion. One thing that I've noticed is that we don't always have good label hygiene. So I would recommend that we have labels such as good for first-time contributors, weights of 1, and different, any labels that we already have, or if we'd like to create new labels to make it easier for them to find and be more transparent. Anybody have any thoughts?
I was going to mention
labels.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Andre. Which label would you recommend, since folks may be watching this or watching asynchronously? I think I know which one, but I figured I'd ask, and we can just get it in this doc here.
Honestly, I would need to go through all of the list. I know there's a first-time contributor label. There might be a community contribution label, but I think that's used once someone's already contributed. So I have to check and see if there are other labels.
I think the first contributor label, yeah, is a label when the community contributor already contributed to that MR.
Okay, so maybe these labels don't exist.
So my understanding of this conversation is to create issues to appeal to community contributors. So we would want labels on there that they could search for to see what's available for them to contribute to. Is that correct? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, but you don't have to create new issues. There can be existing issues that maybe
Right.
you make more transparent. I'm pretty sure there's a label though, like when we do our triage, there's a label that they do the triage based on. Ready for community.
Is it good for new contributors? I added one in the doc. That's the one I usually add, and there's a bunch of issues for that. And there's the other typical for accepting merge requests. So these two in conjunction yield good results.
Okay, thank you, Andre. I was also curious if anyone has ever intentionally like grouped them into an epic, maybe like by some type of categories like handbook, community contributions, or just various web IDE, and then maybe centralize them on a handbook page and possibly advertise them through the various social media options we have. Any thoughts?
I can say that in the front end, I can remember I don't have the link right on top of my head, but we have a couple of like cleanup epics of rewrites and refactors where we've had, we then create a bunch of issues on those epics, and that potentiates the participation. So I feel like that's a great idea. It does require a bit of an effort on a specific topic. If it's like too broad of an epic, it might be too spread, but it's something like rewrite this into that, or clean up the jest or something like that. Clean up the test from Karma to jest, like the ones we had, might better attract other people.
Thank you, Andre. Did anyone else want to verbalize?
Yeah, there is some, just while you were speaking, I found the guidance in the handbook, so I'll link it. There's some guidance around specifically for first-time contributors that they might want to look through issue lists of issues weighted 1. So I think since we're linking to that issue list, it might make sense to have a number of those in your group's backlog.
Okay, thanks, John. All right, was there any more discussion for that discussion topic?
One question I have is has anybody seen more likelihood of a community contribution if they have a good description or a graphic of some sort, like some way to demonstrate it? Like, I don't know if I would call that a best practice, is more question from that perspective of if we've gotten any feedback of that nature.
I haven't, but I also haven't seen a lot of close interactions with the teams at GitLab that do focus on community contributors. I don't find that it's necessarily a priority or something that we think about a lot, which is one of the reasons why I brought it up.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been looking at is this MR, ARR, MAR, which is basically looking at the MRs that are contributed by customers who have a greater size ARR associated with their investment in GitLab. And one of the things we might want to look at, the MEC is primarily driving that. So one of the things we may want to do is go back to MEC and ask them if we can do some analysis on, you know, where we got in community contributions and kind of what have we seen as far as issues go. Probably more of a qualitative than a quantitative way of looking at it from that perspective.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
All right. Ricky, did you want to verbalize?
Sure. Yeah. One thing I was wondering about was just if there's a relationship between the availability and thoroughness of contributor documentation in the doc section and how many community contributions those sections receive. Just insofar as like technical documentation, architecture diagrams, how these features work under the hood.
Okay, that's worth investigating. I'm not aware. Does anyone want to comment or have anything to verbalize? All right, so this sounds like a wonderful area for opportunities. So if you all could just keep these in mind, and maybe we'll come up with some improvements for the next release to track as well. All right, on to the next one. The reason why I chose the DIB values is because this particular retrospective, there was no DIB comments. And so I wanted to take a step back to look at if we wanted to share best practices for how to strengthen DIB values on our team. Any ideas?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. Diversity, inclusion, and belonging is pretty one of our values at GitLab, and I think oftentimes what we need to remember is we all need to live these values and represent them ourselves. We do have competencies in the handbook. I think the People Ops has done a really good job of sort of trying to describe some of these things, and I know the advisory group and the team member resource groups have also been trying to document these things in a way that are sort of digestible by people. So I think taking a look at those things fairly regularly and reminding our team members to be supportive, thinking about of each other, thinking about the language that we use, how inclusive we are in meetings. And that starts with everyone individually, myself included. So I think that we could be using those competencies as a place to start if we weren't sure exactly how to build that out. And then, engaging in TMRGs as for example, managers, but anyone could be reminding team members that there are TMRGs, team member resource groups, that is, that are available to them as well. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Would anyone else like to verbalize thoughts, ideas? I have a few. One would just be to simplify some of this into just learning something new about people who are different from you. And you can do that through coffee chats or book clubs, or like there's a DIB book club that I'm in right now with generational diversity. I'm not in the TMRG, but I'm reading the book with the book club. And also social events. The Create Team Day had a wonderful social event, Create Team Day event a few months ago, where we did virtual tours of our communities, of our cities, of our neighborhoods. And it was really great to kind of get to know the team and learn more about where people came from. So those are really good examples that I had. Does anyone have any other examples they'd like to share?
Darva, if I may add one thing on that particular example you gave, Create Team Day. One of the things we got really good feedback on was the fact that we created 6 calls throughout the day, starting in the Australian time zone, very early for them, so they would be allowed to participate comfortably. So much so that they weren't even expecting for us to make that plan, and they thought that we were planning the days, and that would be their Saturdays. So their assumption was that we didn't count with them. And I felt like that was a particular good feedback, that by just thinking about them from the first moment gave a really good inclusion feeling. So you can take a look at the issue. There's an issue template. If you want to copy, please go ahead. It's been copied by a bunch of groups already. They started off with plan, another example of iteration, and we just keep improving the model.
Yes, thanks to Plan for starting this out. It was a great idea. And thanks for the Create team members who are participating and leading the effort. All right, Ricky, would you like to verbalize?
Sure, yeah. This is just another simple thing that we recently did is we went back and reevaluated all of our synchronous meetings and just took a real hard look at whether they all needed to be synchronous or not. So we ended up removing a synchronous refinement meeting and instead moved all of our refinement to be asynchronous. And that actually worked out a lot better than the synchronous meeting.
All right, thank you. Would anybody else like to comment or share ideas?
I have one more, Darva. Sorry, I don't have the entry yet. But recently, I participated on the Minorities in Tech mentoring program, and one of the projects we did was to take a look at inclusive behavior on the day-to-day, and we created a report that I'm going to be linking in 2 seconds after I stop speaking, where it has a bunch of examples like this. One of the big examples that springs to mind is when somebody's talking about a topic. And you know the answers to, but there's a knower on the call. If you're asked that question and you know that that person is better equipped to answer that question, redirecting that to that person is a way of recognizing their responsibility and their contributions. And some of the times we know the answers and we just answer those, but by doing that, we steal the owner of that topic to participate and to be highlighted there. That's just one of the many examples that's in that document that I'm going to be sharing just now. Please take a look. There's a bunch of examples there.
All right, thank you, Andre. Would anybody else like to add, comment, verbalize? No. All right. So there were 2 other discussion topics that were really great ideas too, but I just could only do 2. So maybe if you all would like, you could roll those over to another week, another retrospective. All right, next, we'll discuss the improvements for the next release to track. Christopher, you are up.
Yeah, so I think we're going to try this in January. We'll do it we'll actually, I forget the exact date because I don't have the calendar up, but oh yeah, I think either January 11th or 12th, I think we'll move the actual retro for next month. And we'll actually probably try an afternoon, US afternoon time. So we'll try to be APAC friendly just as an experiment as well and see if we can get participation that way. So that's my action item for next month.
All right, thank you. John?
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. We had a bit of feedback that we thought we were closing more issues, the team thought, as a result of moving to 2-week iterations. And that was part of dog food and GitLab's iterations feature that we've just finished in the plan team. So we're going to do a straight up count and see if 13.7 correlates with 13.6 and if we really closed more issues or if it was just an anomaly. I have the next item as well. Yeah, this was a bit trickier. Yeah, it's a common problem, and I think it comes up in our retrospectives a lot. Like, how do we get engineers involved in the design of features earlier in the process? And I mentioned it elsewhere in the document, but Jan spent 48 hours shadowing product manager in the team, and got a real feeling for how important this is, that we don't just wait until features get into the plan and breakdown phase, but that we, for some features, get engineers involved earlier. So there's a follow-up issue there if anyone wants to follow like some of the things we're going to try for next time. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know like if we have any solid ideas yet for how we're going to do this, but we have a couple of avenues of investigation.
All right, thanks, John. And I have the next one. So I'm going to create an issue or a poly survey or both to ask engineers and engineering managers how useful they feel the GitLab team retrospectives are to them. That's pretty self-explanatory, but you will be seeing something soon. Craig, are you available?
Yep, I'm here. So just this month, I created a async retro issue for the database maintainers. I was hearing they were spending a lot of time on reviews and maintainership. So put together an async retro, got some really good feedback and got some good iterations, some good small steps that we can do to improve the overall process, either through documentation or updating templates, et cetera. And we have some longer term improvements that we can implement, like some kind of automation. It's all listed out there in that first issue. And it went well enough that I created one for backend maintainers too, because I work with both database maintainers and backend maintainers. For the backend maintainer one, I targeted January, since we're approaching the holidays. But looking for any kind of feedback, anybody that wants to participate. And yes, to answer your question, Christopher, I think any specialty maintainership would be great if anybody wants to do this. I know my bandwidth is limited to what I have done here for database and backend, but if anybody else wants to do a similar retro for other maintainer groups, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, let Craig and myself know. And otherwise, Craig, I'll try to find somebody within the next month.
Awesome.
All right, thank you, Craig. Well, that's it for today. So thank you everyone for sharing today. We're at the end of the retrospective. Please scroll to the top of the document and you will see the text iteration for 13.7 retrospectives. That link there will take you to an issue that will capture any feedback you have from today's retrospective. Thanks again, everyone, for attending, and enjoy your day. Bye.
Thanks, Darla.